Welcome to Trauma Recovery Anonymous. My name is Richard and I am your host. Today I'm very happy to invite a guest by the name of Kate Rizzo. We're going to talk about grief and how to cope with grief. Myself, my part of my journey was it wasn't that I wanted to die, but I didn't want to live. And I attempted suicide 3 times. Fortunately enough, I didn't succeed at any of those 3. And the final moment, I realized that I had to be a solution I tried drugs, I tried medication, I tried therapy, I tried food, sugar, sex, porn. I tried everything to fill the hole in my soul, and nothing worked. And at the last moment, I was in Bali. I was going to drown myself. And at the last moment, God sent this hippie out of nowhere to grab my board and pull me into shore. And I was crying on my hands and knees on the shore to know who sent this crazy lunatic hippie guy to save me and rescue me. But I knew I didn't want to die in that moment. I knew I wanted to live, and I knew I needed to find a spiritual solution, something to heal the whole of my soul. I had a broken spirit. And that's what really has really driven me to find a solution for people with past trauma memories. That I don't believe any of us are mentally ill. I believe we have this. I heard recently a Chinese philosopher saying how when we reach terrible depression and despair, death seems much more acceptable than trying to live life in life's terms. And then I remember a Jesuit priest saying to me, would you give up trying to live life in life's terms and choose to live life in God's terms? And I'd never, ever imagined I'd have a relationship with God. I thought because I'd lost my faith as a Roman Catholic, that option was gone now, because I rejected my Roman Catholic faith. I wasn't allowed to have God in my life. And he said to me, you don't have to join any denomination or any religion or any church. Just make a decision to ask God to take your demons off you for 8 hours of sleep, for an hour here or 15 minutes there or 20 minutes there, just for peace of mind, so you don't have that feeling that you want to give up in life. And I tried that, and it worked. The first time I did it, I asked for 8 hours sleep, and I got 8 hours of sleep, no nightmares, no flashbacks, no triggers. I was amazed. I couldn't believe it was this easy. You could say a prayer, ask God to take your demons from you, and you got peace of mind. It blew me away. So again, that was my story, but I've listened to Kate Rizzo, and she's got a beautiful idea where she lost a son to addiction. She's going to talk all about her journey now. And I'm going to sit back and leave her talk about herself, because I have my message for people, but my message isn't for everybody. A lot of people have been tainted by the idea of God, and that what we call church hurt. Many people have been church hurt, and the idea of turning to God can be very, very difficult. So we can look for some other solution. And Kate has really blessed herself with the idea of writing. And she got into writing to do with her loss. And she's going to talk about that now. I believe she's written poetry, all sorts of books. And God forgive me for saying this, but Kate, like the rest of us, we're nobody. But we use our pain and suffering to make a difference in the world. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a priest or pastor or minister. But I witness to everyone in my audience that you can ask God to give you 8 hours of sleep at night time, and he'll give it to you if you ask him on his term. But I'm not going to go into that now. Now it's all about Kate Rizzo. So please, I'm not going to have applause. No one can hear you applauding, but please welcome Kate Rizzo. She's going to share to you now her story, her experience, strength, and hope. And please, God, at the end of it, you'll have gained some sense of how to deal with your grief in a different manner. Kate, lovely to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Oh my goodness, I don't think I can have that. That was such a beautiful story when you were talking about being in Bali. Gosh, all I could think is, God, I wish I would have asked another time for somebody to be that person to come and, besides his family, and pull him out of the water. Not that he was in the water, but just the proverbial water. So yeah, my name's Katie Rizzo. I live in the United States, in Arizona. My husband and I met in graduate school, and we moved to Arizona, and I was lucky enough, we dealt with a little bit of infertility, but I was lucky enough to have 3 beautiful boys. And at that point, I think that was the happiest I'd been in my life. Not that motherhood makes you happy or anything like that, but I just I felt like I was exactly where God wanted me to be. And at that point, I didn't have any faith. I mean, I tried, but I had everything, I had this beautiful family that I got to be a part of, and it was a huge blessing. I became a school teacher, a high school teacher. I taught AP Bio and Honors Anatomy, and all three of my boys went through my high school. Which again, there's just nothing better to watch your kids grow up and watch other beautiful children grow up and be there for them. About the time that my son Nicholas was in high school, it was obvious that he was dealing with anxiety, social anxiety mostly. He was voted prom king. And he didn't want to go to the ceremony because he said he got nominated just because his mom's a teacher there. And he's like, everybody likes you, so they picked me, and I'm not going. And he was so nervous. And the only thing I could think to do was to give him a can of beer. And I thought, this will calm him down. And his dad and I don't drink. We don't do drugs. I thought, okay, well, and he gulped the entire thing down. He said, I don't think you know me, because this does not help. And I thought, what if I had a can of beer? I would be like probably on the floor. But I think that was then I had a little nudge that, maybe this kid has been using alcohol and drugs before now. Let me back up a little bit. So he was really good at soccer. So I think most of the world calls it football, but he was very good at it. And he had a bunch of injuries during it. Like he hurt his knee, he broke his collarbone, he broke his leg. I mean, he'd broken a bunch of bones during it. And each time he would have surgery, and they would give him opioids. I don't say that to mean like, this is the reason that Nicholas had an addiction. I have no idea. Some people think that the more opioids you use, the higher the likelihood that you'll be addicted. That might be the case. I don't want to say like, this is it. It wasn't trauma. It wasn't me. It wasn't our family. I don't know what it was. But at that point in high school, I realized something's going on with my son. He went to college on a soccer scholarship, and he played D2 soccer. And I could just tell like the light in him was going out. Now I know that he was taking pills in college, a lot of pills. And gosh, that breaks my heart to say it, but it's true. I think his go-to was downers. He really liked benzos, so he came home from college and things weren't going well. COVID hit. I think he tried fentanyl a few times. Well, I know he tried fentanyl a few times on purpose, just because he was trying to numb that pain. And then it became apparent he couldn't live at home with us and keep his job, because we became a part of Al-Anon, which I love Al-Anon. It helped me get a lot of tools on not having expectations, not trying to live through my own kids, trying to detach without an ex. And so Nicholas went to live on his own, and we tried very hard to encourage him to go to rehab. It just became very apparent that things weren't going well. Here in Arizona, you can do a mental health hold, because Nicholas was stealing lots of money from us. He was cashing the same check over and over, and our bank was letting him do that. And we said, you've stole over $10,000. We need you to go to rehab. He wouldn't do it. We called the police and said, could you pretty please? And finally, we did a 24-hour mental health hold. And while he was at the place, he went through withdrawal. And I thought that maybe that they would be able to help him with withdrawals, but they weren't able to detox him. And he ended up in the ICU with wet brain and rhabdomyolysis, where your body starts eating its own muscles. And those were all from long-term effects of taking benzodiazepines and opioids together. At that point, all of his doctors said, you need to go to rehab. He said he would think about it. Once he got out of ICU, he went home, and, we begged him, please. He finally decided that financially he needed us to support him. So he went to rehab. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for him. So the rehabs here in the US, I think they mean well, but it's a lot of profit. And, our insurance didn't ask for a review. And while they were reviewing it, they sold his bed. So they asked him to go to outpatient, and then in outpatient, for some reason, there became no space for him. So he went to a different outpatient. And at that one, although he was going every day, they decided he wasn't participating enough, and they kicked him out. And then he overdosed. So there's so much I want to say to people who love somebody with an addiction, but also to those who are in AA or are in the addiction community. And that is just to, be that person that was there for you in Bali, and pull people off that board, and don't give up on that. I feel like he needed somebody to just say, somebody who was in the AA program or in a 12-step program, no, you're my person. And maybe I'm fooling myself. Maybe it really needed to come from him. I don't know, but we never got to that place, and which has been really horrific for our family.
Katie, thanks for sharing that. So yeah. I'm going to give you a moment to catch your breath. Again, I don't tend to tell people, there's trigger warnings and that kind of stuff, because we're talking about life, and life is triggering, and we need to speak about this stuff it's real. There's not something that's hidden over with trigger warnings and this kind of stuff that it's not safe to talk about. We need to talk about the hard truth that we lose people to addiction. We lose people to suicide. I never told my family how I felt. I felt so less than, and I felt if I told them how I felt, they would laugh at me, or they'd ridicule me, or they'd put me down, because they all seemed to have it all together, and I was in this total place of despair. I'm 38 years sober this year from alcohol. I was also addicted to gambling, sex, porn, sugar, you name it. When you're trying to fill the hole in your soul, you're trying whatever you can get your hands on. So I never did drugs, but if I did drugs, they'd be like your son. It'd be every single drug I could get my hands on to fill the hole in my soul. But I remember in my recovery, about year 20, I went to my older brother and I said to him, do you ever feel like this? And he went, all the time. I was shocked. He's got it all together. What do you mean all the time? He said, yeah, all the time I feel that. So what do you do? Well, I know I can't lose it because you've lost it. I've got to hold the fort together. So I do this. And he says, I would do this. I go for a run. I go to the gym. I go for a swim. I'd go to have a sleep, a nap. I'd write a letter. I'd do some writing or something. And so I copied what he did. And suddenly I'd managed. And I realized you can ask people for advice and then take that advice. And if it works, keep it. And if it doesn't work, discard it. But I never knew. And I was, God forgive me, I must have been 42 years of age. I'd gone 42 years of life keeping my feelings a secret. And that's the worst thing that we do in addiction. And when we feel like giving up in life, we don't think it's safe to tell our families how we really feel. So if you have any children that you're worried about, tell them it's okay to express your feelings. And then ask me if I feel that way, and I will tell you all the things I do. Flight, fight, freeze, fawn, fate, and acceptance. That if they learn that there are solutions and it's okay not to be perfect. I used to think I needed to be John Wayne or Clint Eastwood. I couldn't be a big girl. I couldn't be afraid. I had to be strong when I was at my weakest. And I didn't realize it was okay to be weak. My brother told me that some days he found it very, very difficult to manage And thankfully, he'd tell his wife, and she'd hug him. Or she'd say, there, it's okay, and you have a good cry. And then he'd get on, he'd just do the next right thing. And he might fail miserably, but he would get through that day, and he'd start the next day. And I didn't understand that normal people suffered the same stuff that we thought we were unique to.
Yeah.
So I just want to put that out there. And again, you're right, it has to come from him. But if we can create an environment for people like your son and for myself to know it's safe to feel our feelings, to understand that we have 6 responses. One thing I need to say at this point is that when we're children, we have 2 responses that we use all the time, freeze and fawn. So a child living in a home that's dysfunctional and aggro, whatever, and they can't leave the house, they will disassociate, they'll be introverted, they'll be socially awkward, they'll withdraw, they will isolate, they will people please, they will fake it, they'll do all this kind of pretend that everything's okay when it's not.
Right.
Or they'll fawn, they'll people please, they'll fake it, they'll suffer fools gladly, they'll suffer in silence, they'll be passive aggressive, they'll do all these behaviors to pretend it's normal when it's not. We have to teach them that these were very healthy responses when they were children. But once they pass puberty and they start becoming adults, they have to stop using those behaviors. They don't work anymore. And they have to use flight, fight, faith, and acceptance. And if we can teach them all the different ways to flight, all the different ways to fight, all the different ways to fate. And so I'm going to talk to you about your fight, because your writing is you fighting. Maybe it was fight at one moment, but it became really your way of fighting. So again, please talk about that, because I think that's going to benefit people greatly.
Okay, but before I do, what you said was so beautiful. You said it's fight, faith, and acceptance.
Fight, freeze are the normal tree that animals and human beings have.
Yeah.
And then fawn was one that was categorized by a mental health professional about maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But the 2 we don't talk about are faith and acceptance. I'm going to share something here, but I know they're part of this. So when we were born, I remember seeing a TikTok video of two brothers in the womb, okay? And one says to the other, what happens after we come out of the womb? The other guy says, oh, it's all over. Like when we leave the womb, there's nothing after. It's going to be terrible. The other guy says, well, what if it's a life beyond the wildest dreams? And the idea was they're talking about heaven and hell. Like, but if you believe in God, you go to heaven. But my thought was, when we come out of the womb, we're in that state of fight, flight, freeze, fawn, failure, acceptance. So you see a child coming out of the womb, it's kicking and screaming. That child is in a state of fight. Let's say fight for the first time, okay? The nurse takes that child, wraps it in the blanket, puts it in a cot to subdue it. That child now knows its primary response of fight has been taken from it. And in the future, it's going to be in a state of flight or freeze. The next child comes out of the room kicking and screaming, and the nurse wraps it in the blanket, puts it in the cot. This child's in a state of flight. And of course, now it's been told its state of flight can't work. It can never trust that again. So now it's in a state of fight or freeze. The child comes out of the room comatose. The doctor holds up by the ankle, slaps it in the bum, gets a reaction. And that child now knows it can never freeze again. So that child is always in a state of fight or flight. We hear that many times, people stuck in fight or flight. Because their freeze was taken from them, they're in a state of fight or flight. But then you see a child coming out of the womb, happy, joyous, and free. That child is in either acceptance or faith. They've either got a faith and belief that God is in charge and everything will be okay, or they're accepting that everything's going to be okay. And they're handed to the mother, and the mother holds them, that connection is made again. And they go on to be the presidents and the movie stars and the famous, the confident people in the world. While the rest of us are stuck in, we've been deprived of fight, flight, freeze, or freeze. The fawn doesn't come till later. I think fawn doesn't come until actually we are developed into human beings, and then for it becomes. So I think for a lot of us, I don't know if you were looking back, what you thought maybe Nicholas was missing of fight, flight, and freeze. For me, I believe fight was taken from me. So I was in a state of either freeze or fawn, freeze or flight all my young life. I was afraid of everybody and everything, and I would disassociate and I would shut down. And I used to remember at the age of 27, I would get down on my hands and knees behind the couch, my hands over my head, and be rocking back and forth, humming to myself, waiting until the danger passed. My parents left, and then I come out behind the couch and I walk around and get things okay. Like insane stuff, But so I think fight was. I think I must have come out of the womb, and fight was taken from me, dropped in the blanket, and so I end up in freeze or fawn. Now that's my belief, freeze or fight. But I think that's a big part of it as well.
Well, that was very eye-opening. I love the faith and acceptance addition to it. I think that's exactly right. And something else you said, it was about shame. Like you brought up shame a lot. And I think once Nicholas was using, my whole family was just buried in shame. We were so embarrassed not to be, quote, the perfect family. And we really tried to kind of put on a good face for everybody, and Nicholas especially. And I think he really, addiction is a disease of isolation. I think he felt incredibly alone and embarrassed, and like he was the only one in the world who had such a disgusting habit. And by the end, I think my husband and I had enough Al-Anon in us that we would talk to him about, no, this isn't you. You are this beautiful person. This is a disease. But I don't know that it got through. I think at some point, opioids and benzos just kind of make your brain mush. But I'll go into the
solution.
My story. Yeah. So once Nicholas passed, life was terrible, as you can imagine, for all of us, his two brothers and my husband and I. And I started noticing that grief really mirrors pregnancy. And for those of you that haven't been pregnant or who had an easy pregnancy, I'll tell you a little bit about pregnancy and grief. So the first trimester, the first part of grief, I felt just sick and like, not even in my body. Like I was just so physically ill. Like I was like, there was like a ringing in my head, and we slept all the time, and it was as if there was like a new creature boring into my being. And then after a while, I wasn't quite as sick, but I could feel this thing growing inside of me. And it was a period of everybody else in the world was going on with their normal lives. And I felt like I was just about to explode. It was something. And it really did. It felt just like the second trimester. And then during the third trimester, although I wasn't physically showing where people would be like, oh, she's pregnant with grief, I started telling everyone. It just felt like grief had grown so much inside of me that it just had to come out. Like we would go to, and that was kind of a beautiful part too, because the shame of the addiction and the shame of losing my son and being the only one that I knew that had a son who had passed, I would tell random people, and, sometimes people would just, recoil and run. But a lot of times people would be beautiful and accept me and accept our family and, reach out to us. And during this period, I started waking up in the morning and praying. And this was kind of a time where I found a faith in like nature and the higher power as I know it. And I started writing poems, and I had never written poetry before. And I started posting them on Instagram and Facebook, and it was crazy. And I thought my other two sons probably at this point just want to curl under a blanket and just be like, oh my gosh. But actually they were really sweet about it. And like, yeah, that I felt that way. And I don't know that I gave them a voice, but I think they allowed for my voice. Around that time, I started writing, kind of going back through my journal and looking at what could help other people. And then after that is what I call delivery. And Nick Cage is somebody who, Nick Cave is somebody who he's if you don't know about him, he is a brilliant musician, author, and he's a father who lost two children. And he suggested in one of his talks that grief was living inside of him, and it was just crushed on his face at all times, and he just couldn't get free. And not that he wanted to be free, but it was just so much and so intense all the time. And he said he pictured grief coming out of his body and sitting next to him. And so I thought, well, that's crazy, but I did that. I took my grief and I said, hey, I need you to you can be a baby right next to me, but you can't be just like all encompassing. And I picture my grief as being kind of like a little baby orangutan. And sometimes he just beats his chest and is unreasonable, and you just have to wail with him. But a lot of times he and I can kind of communicate, which sounds insane, but that's the way it is.
That's the way it is, yeah.
Yeah. But then I sat down and looked at my journal, and I thought there are some glimmers of hope in here, and maybe somebody could be helped by these glimmers. And I wrote them all down, and I sent them to an agent, and he sold it as a book that's going to be published by Kohler Books, and Blackstone Publishing has the audio licensing, and it comes out June 12th for pre-orders and October 6th for the actual book. And let me just give you some glimmers that really helped me. One was exercising every day. I found like my body held in grief, and people would say you have to metabolize it. And exercising every day became non-negotiable. If I didn't do it, I knew the next day I would be devastated. The other thing was that I had to have a community. Addiction is an isolating disease, I think, as everyone knows. And I really wanted to isolate. And I knew from Al-Anon and from reading about how we are humans that need community. And whenever I have the opportunity, I really do try to say yes, which is what somebody in the grief community, Colin Campbell, says, to say yes to everything. So when people would say, hey, do you want to get a pedicure? Even though I hate getting pedicures, I would say yes. Do you want to go for a walk? Yes. Do you want to have coffee? For sure. Can I come over and bring a casserole? Please. Even though like everything in me said no. Because honestly, who are we besides people who want to be seen and see other people? And some of the most beautiful things since Nicholas has left have been when I get to communicate with my boys or with others. So something in AA they say, and I don't really like this saying, but it kind of sticks, is that motion is lotion. I like maybe motion is ocean. I don't know, but
I've never heard that. I've never heard that. Anyways, but I want to jump in quickly to say that is beautiful. The idea of just saying yes to life is phenomenal. I've never heard that before, and that's the most beautiful suggestion for you to share with the audience. Whatever's going on, say yes to life. It's so easy to go to a place of depression and despair. My safe place is to be depressed. I can be depressed in a split moment. It only takes a second, and I can go to the depths of despair and depression. I want to kill myself. I really can. I don't mean to say very, very blasé. Coming from a place where I attempted suicide 3 times, it's much harder to say yes to life than to go to victimhood. My safe place is victimhood, depression, and despair. So your idea of say yes, even if you don't like the person, so your in-laws or your ex, and they ask you to do something, just say yes. That's the most beautiful gift. If no one else, if my audience gets nothing else from you today but that, that is a gift that's beautiful. Katie, absolutely wonderful, Katie. Thank you very much. Continue. But I had to just mention there that say yes to life.
Yeah. This last weekend, there was a group of female writers, and they invited me to go on this retreat. And before Nicholas, I would have been like, no, I've got my own little world. I have my dogs. I don't need anyone. And I was like, Katie Rizzo, you go on that. And I rode up with them. People who were totally different from me. There was a woman who, she writes YA romance. And I think normally I'd be like, oh, I don't even read romance or whatever, but she's the most beautiful human being. What a gift that I got to learn about her. So yes to saying yes. I've been trying to look at the world with an open heart and seeing ways, and this sounds crazy and woo-woo, but that God or Nicholas is trying to communicate with me. The other day, so I live in the desert. I live in Arizona, it's a hot place and there aren't a lot of huge birds. The other day, my husband and I went out into our backyard and there was a bald eagle and it sat in our tree for 2.5 hours. Nick and I just sat there. I mean, when a bald eagle arrives at your house, your job is to just sit there and appreciate it, right? And I think normally I would have gone, oh, that's great, take a few pictures and then go off to work. But I was like, this is the end of my day. I need to just sit here, have some coffee and experience this. So saying yes to experiences like that. We have an Aura frame, or it's an electronic frame that rotates through pictures. And that's really helped in my grief to go back. And sometimes I in my head, I think, I've uploaded probably, 200,000 pictures. So it can't be random when pictures come up that are meaningful between me and Nicholas. And I'll say, hey, honey, thank you. And then one other thing is, and this is from AA, it's not a quote from me, but if you're hurting in your self-esteem, they say to do esteemable things. And I think that is so true. And a lot of times when I'm hurting and feeling like, oh, poor me, my son isn't here, like the world's a terrible place, that is true. And I need to go out and do something for someone else. Just recently, there was a pilot who died in my neighborhood. He crashed his plane and he left 3 older dogs. And I can't tell you how beautiful it was for me to find homes for those 3 dogs, put them in my car. I mean, who doesn't love a dog? And take them to their new owners, see the delight. They actually got adopted by my mom and her neighbors, and they all live in this little community and they walk their dogs together. And these older women in their, 80s, and these older dogs who are all over 10 and 12, it just that was an estimable moment. Yeah.
It's life. Yeah, it's wonderful. My take on the grief thing, and again, I was very fortunate. I met this very elderly Jesuit priest, and he's still alive. I don't know how he's still alive. He's suffered with COVID and the whole lot, and he's must be in his 90s now. And then I met this wonderful Protestant minister who taught me about Jesus for about 3 years, all through COVID. We'd meet for breakfast each Tuesday morning. We'd go and have breakfast, and he'd teach me about Jesus and Christ and God. And he never asked me to go to his church. He never demanded me to go to his church or join his denomination. Yeah. He would just take an hour and a half to meet me for breakfast, and we'd have breakfast together. He'd say a prayer before breakfast, a prayer at the end of breakfast, and during the hour, he would take me through John or Matthew or Luke, or just explain to me all this powerful scripture, Isaiah, powerful stuff that jump out at you, like it was just like, I can achieve all things through Christ. He told me that piece about I can achieve all things through Christ. What you do is you get a pen and paper, and on this sheet, you at the top you put down all things, and on the sheet of paper you write down everything that troubles you. So you put down my relationship with my wife, and my mother-in-law, and my daughter, and my son, and my neighbors, and my boss, and my colleagues, and the dirty neighbor, and the second neighbor, and whatever, and my family of origin, and whatever, and then COVID and whatever going on, and all petrol, whatever, and you make a list of everything that's all things, okay? And then you recite, we didn't do your nose first, and then you recite 7 times, I can achieve all things through Christ who strengthens me. And then I say, my all things, this is my all things. And the next time I say it, I can achieve, and I list my all things out loud through Christ who strengthens me. And then I meditate on, I've given God all of that.
Yeah.
And then picture in your mind as though you're standing in front of God, and he's just taking it off. He's saying, "Okay, Richie, I'm taking that off you. Go off and have your day." And see him, you have this interaction with this guy in a white robe, white beard, and he's saying, "Okay, I've got that crap off you now. You go off and enjoy yourself and meditate on that visualization." And that works. And I was blown away when this happened. So again, but then I was told about my grief, and I had a childhood grief over my trauma as a child, and anger at my parents. And the guy said, you have 2 choices. You can choose to be angry at the world. And if you go to your death, angry at the world, whoever's harmed you in the past will get away with it. They get to go to heaven because you made them suffer your wrath on this earth. Whether you got vengeance or not, the fact that you chose to suffer your wrath on this earth, they get away with it and they get to go into heaven. But if you give your anger and wrath to God today by praying for that person, forgiving that person, wishing that person gets everything you want, that God will take them off your hand, and then when they die, they will face the hell for all eternity, and 7 generations of their descendants will follow them. And that's a much better kind of punishment what they did to me than what I can achieve on this earth. I mean, I remember the pastor said to me, "Can you imagine if you got the person who harmed you was arrested, and the prisons are so full they got 6 months out and 3 months for best behavior? How would you feel about that?" And I'd be kind of livid. He said, "Well, if that's what you did, then they've got a pass and they get to go to heaven. So if you give it to God and they go to hell for eternity, will that feel better?" And I said, "Yeah, it would feel better. But then you do that." Now I find later on, now I'm kind of thinking, no, God, don't be so hard on them. This is a few years later. I'm thinking, I shouldn't have prayed for that. That's too hard. No, don't be that hard on not all his not all his descendants, but that kind of thing. A way of looking at things differently. I love what you said about saying yes to life. That's absolutely, and doing things that are. I never heard in my 38 years, if you feel low in esteem, do something esteemable. That's a fantastic idea. I've always heard about be grateful when you're feeling really crap. Be grateful for the fact that you have breath today. God has given you breath today. You've got a family, you've got a clothes on your back, a roof over your head. Those kind of things. I've heard the graduate. I've never heard the esteem thing. Must be an American thing. Well, thank you for that.
It's very good. It's not mine, so yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah. So one last thing is that also my poetry is going to be published by Extra Publishing, and you can. It's a book called "None of Them Are You," and it's available for pre-order on July 2nd, and then it's going to be available to buy on the Day of the Dead, which is November 1st. And then if anybody wanted to follow me or contact me, I have a website. It's katierizzo.com.
Well, I'm going to make certain that when I post this episode, all your information is going to be on it.
You're so sweet. Thank you.
It's not even being sweet.
Okay.
You've carried a wonderful message today. I love the bit about say yes to life. I mean, that is just mind-blowing. I've never heard that before. That's the most beautiful idea. Just say yes to life. When you're feeling the depths of despair, for those who are suffering with grief and those who are like me in addiction or thinking of giving up in life, just say yes. Just go with the flow. Whatever's happening, just give it a chance. Go on. Sorry.
Something when you were talking about being angry and giving them forgiveness and giving the punishment to God, something in the Blue Book where they say, I don't know what the actual quote is, but it's about having a prayer to give everything that I want from me to the person. Do you know that?
Yes.
And and it's something that I've been working on. It's not something that I'm perfect at, but it turns out there was a doctor who was prescribing my son benzodiazepines for 3 years legally, and he was doing the maximum amount. And we only found out about that once Nicholas was really in the ICU. And I was very angry with that doctor. I called him and I was like, don't you ever prescribe my son another one, right? And like, he's in ICU. His brain is, he has wet brain. It was just terrible. And after Nicholas got out, the receptionist called and said, he's 25. You can't tell us what to prescribe or whatnot. So I have a lot of anger towards that person. And I've been trying to pray for him what I have for myself. And the reason being is that we all have trauma. Maybe that doctor has addiction. For a while, I tried to get him arrested. I called the DA and was like, this guy is killing people. And the DA said, well, he's doing it legally. So I've been really trying to do that prayer because I don't want that to turn me into a monster. As I think Nietzsche said, something about how don't let it turn into a monster. And you can feel that way when you carry that deep-seated anger.
Well, it's very important to understand you don't have to forgive them to their face.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. You're not forgiving that person to the face. That's too hard to do because they don't deserve forgiveness. For what they did to me, that person who molested me doesn't deserve to hear it's okay. Like, okay. I'm okay with you molesting me. That's a load of baloney. And God says you don't say that. What you do is in silence, go into your bedroom, lock the door, close the curtains, turn off the lights, climb into the wardrobe, and in silence say, Lord God, this person who molested me, I pray for them that they get everything they want in their life. I pray that they have a wonderful life, a joyous life, full of love and laughter and happiness and joy and serenity. And I forgive them completely and unconditionally, freely and unconditionally forevermore. And do that prayer in a wardrobe for 30 days until one day you meet this person and they have no effect on you.
Yeah.
And then you know you're at peace and you know God has taken your anger off you. But I would never dream of thinking I have to go back to that person and put myself in their company and say, I forgive you. That would be the most insane thing to do. So you're allowed to not forgive them to the face.
Okay.
But the problem is that they have rent-free space in our brains. And until we're evicting them so we can have peace of mind. That's the only reason why we're forgiving them, is so we can have peace of mind. So if we can evict them from our mind and they're gone, well then we're no longer being triggered. We hear their voice, or we hear their name, or we see them walking by. We're not triggered because they don't have any rent-free space in our head. So that's the only reason why we're forgiving them. And that's the wonderful thing you learn when you forgive the other person, is to evict them from your mind.
Yeah. I think in AA they say this, but I know in Al-Anon they say this, like, how free do you want to be? Yeah. And my answer is always 100%, but it's hard to get there, right?
Yeah. But the problem for most of us, I did Al-Anon as well. I'm married, I've got a wife, I've got a 22-year-old daughter, she's 20 years old today, and a mother-in-law living in the house, three women. And sometimes I can be, I'm a recovering alcoholic and Al-Anon, and I can be clinically insane. On my worst days, I can be selfish, self-centered, victimhood. So I needed to learn what it's like for my wife and my daughter mother to live with me. So I went to Al-Anon so I could see it from the other perspective, what it's like. So I went to Al-Anon for a while. I got an Al-Anon sponsor. They took me through the 12 steps, just so I could see it from their side. So when I act out, I kind of go, Richie, hold back there now, because on Al-Anon terms, you're the problem, and that's just 4 fingers pointing at you. But you're the common denominator. And that helped an awful lot. I think 12-step recovery is phenomenal. And I think it's super. And even if you don't have an addiction, there are 12-step groups out there. There's Al-Anon, there's ACOA for if you're coming from a codependent relationship or dysfunctional home, dysfunctional parents, or whatever it is. There's ACOA, the ACA, and there's CODA, and there's Al-Anon. There are a number of programs. And there's also an emotions program. There are a number of 12-step programs that you can join, and you'll find people who've gone down the path before you. They've worked the 12 steps, and they won't fix or save you, but they will teach you how they deal with life on a daily basis, and you can copy what they did and then learn from them and then become stronger in yourself. We need as much help as we get. We're part of the human race. We're not meant to do this alone, And that's the whole thing, So,
beautifully said.
Katie, it was great having you on the show. And we're coming towards the end of our time. Are there 3 things you can share with the audience that kind of, I like to see if you can give 3 different things they can share with the audience. Things you do yourself that maybe.
Well, I think I've shared some of them. I would say one thing for sure is to get into nature for me has been really important. You can really feel connected to the universe, especially if you can get into big, wide open spaces and look out and realize just how you're just a part of it all. It right sizes you. I think another thing is when you get all tangled and things start, at least for me, when I get all tangled and I start getting feeling like I can fall back into my old habits, or people are being unreasonable. I always go back to changing myself. Like, what do I need to change? Is it my expectations? Is it where I am right now? Like, but what can I change right now so that I can get untangled? instead of my old habits were to try to change other people or to ask, like, hey, could you please stop doing that? And then the last thing I think is how important art is. Since Nicholas left, I've been doing a lot of writing, a lot of poetry, taking poetry classes. And I think when I was happy, I didn't need art. And now that I'm hurting, art is so healing. My husband is a physicist, so he's very logical. And since Nicholas passed, he's been playing the guitar.
Wow.
He took guitar lessons. Yeah. And sitting there listening to his music and kind of witnessing his pain, there's something very beautiful in art too. So, yeah. So I guess those would be my three.
Well, that's listen, Katie, you're a credit. Thank you very much. Really appreciate telling your story. It wasn't easy. You've held it together. Not that you had to hold it together, but you presented a wonderful message of hope and of not that you're past it all, because we never get over the loss of a loved one.
No,
but you've been able to focus then on your husband and the other children. I have a friend of mine whose son died, and it destroyed him so much that he gave up in life and he neglected his other children and his grandchildren because of one particular child died. And so it's very hard for people. But I think the message you carry of hope, I love the idea of say yes to life. No matter what it is, say yes to life. That was a wonderful gift you shared with my audience.
You're sweet.
On my social media platforms, I don't know how it's happened. I have about 13,000 followers. So to all you out there, please jump on, flock to Katie's banner and become her followers. I think she's got a wonderful message of how to deal with grief. And you can ask her about writing and art and how that helps her. And maybe you can learn from that too. Katie, thank you very much for coming on board.
No, thank you. That was beautiful. I learned a lot as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.